listening to the DFS On Deck podcast, brought to you by LineStar, the top-rated DFS tool set and #1 companion for DraftKings, FanDuel, and Yahoo Daily Fantasy. Go LineStar Premium now at LineStarApp.com. Now, here are your hosts, fantasy baseball experts Joe Pisapia and Chris Meaney.
Welcome to the DFS On Deck podcast, brought to you by LineStar. Happy Monday, everybody. I'm Chris Meaney. Thanks for taking the time to hang out. Joe Pisapia is off for the week, the good dad that he is. Took his kids to Orlando. Universal Studios should be a good time. We wish him and his fam a great time down south. Hopefully, everybody had a great Easter weekend. I got you covered this week. Don't worry. Got a few solid guests lined up for the week, including LineStar's MLB writer, Greg Landry. He's going to check in tomorrow, but today I have one of the best DFS players in the game, covers all sports, but really you've seen all of his work. Hopefully you've seen his work. You know, he's got a pretty good resume. USA Today, RotoWire, most recently DraftKings. It's Neil Parker, NA Parker 77s, where you can follow him on Twitter. Neil, happy Monday, man. Thanks for taking the time to join me today.
My pleasure, Chris. It's been quite an eventful start to the Major League season, so I'm just happy to sit down, plug through some numbers, take a few stabs at some players heading into the pretty deep slate. Good lineup of games, and it's just fun to be off on a Monday, and looking forward to some baseball tonight.
I bet it is fun to be off on a Monday. That's right. Yeah, soak it in. We got 10 games on the schedule. Neil, before we get into, the games today, and we'll break them down. We'll keep things the same we've been doing here for the show. Neil, we just run through all the games, talk pitchers and give a couple plays, and we'll throw in the LineStar app. If you don't have it already, I mean, you need to get it. There's some great, just all kinds of cool tools, and they spit out values and projections. It's really just top notch over there. So we'll run through some games, but I just want to get your thoughts on the MLB season. I mean, you and I keep in touch basically every single day, Neil, talking a lot of sports. I know you're a big hockey guy, but baseball as well. And I don't know what you've noticed, so I'd like to get your thoughts on some trends. But one thing Joe and I have noticed is, man, even from a season-long standpoint, there's been some stud pitchers who they've gotten out of the gate pretty slow. And we've seen some injuries, and we've seen a lot of home runs. What's your takeaway from the first month of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple ways to look at it, and both the points you just made are definitely correct. Tommy Stella has 6 home runs. I mean,
Okay.
He had 6 home runs over the last 2 years with the Cubs. Christian Yelich is, beanstick. He's a pretty good hitter, but he makes me look like Yokozuna. So these guys are leaving the yard left, right, and center. And that is the truth too. They're going yard to all fields. Starting pitching definitely has taken a major blow. We've had some breakouts when we look at Tyler Glasnow, we look at Luis Castillo. Sorry,
Luis Castillo
has there. Cincinnati Red, but those two have been breakout guys, right? But other than that, I mean, we really haven't had a lot of strong pitchers who were taken high survive. Trevor Bauer, Justin Verlander, and Jose Barreros might be it. And then obviously Blake Snell pitched well, but guess where he is?
Yeah.
IL. So
yeah,
it's been tough.
It has been tough. I mean, here we are a month into the season, and looking at just DraftKings and FanDuel in terms of pricing for a starting pitcher. I mean, Chris Sale is on the hill today, and Mike Minor is more expensive than him on DraftKings. Like, that's to the point where we've gotten here. I mean, you look over on the FanDuel side, Brad Keller, $8,500, Chris Sale, $8,400. So it's unbelievable. We'll get into Sale in a little bit in his matchup, but it is crazy to start the season. There's been a lot of power. We won't get into too much of what happened on the weekend. Just a couple of news and notes. Aaron Judge joins a list of what is just a full field that you could have. I mean, the Yankees IL, their entire team basically is on the injured list. It's unbelievable. Judge is the latest to join the crew. We had Max Scherzer, who got lit up in Miami this weekend. Yu Darvish continues to struggle. The Red Sox got a sweep. I think that was a big, very telling, because they've struggled out of the gate, and they go into Tampa, they get the sweep. All the games, really close, but they pull that off. Miami takes actually 2 of 3 from Washington. Baltimore continues to give up home runs. So a ton. And Neil, what's your thoughts on Boston quickly? That's obviously a huge, sweep for them, but I mean, the hangover was for real.
Yeah, big time. And it just seems to be throughout the lineup, but you can't expect Mookie Betts to stay down, JD Martinez to stay down, Xander Bogaerts to stay down. I mean, they've got a great lineup. And eventually the pitching will round itself into form. And finally, I think there's some bullpen stability. And that might have been the biggest question mark entering the season. And Ryan Brazier looks like he's doing okay. And that's a big boost for them. Sales velocity was up last start, so I expect him to sort of round back into form as well. But there definitely are concerns. I mean, there were injury problems last year, and just because the Red Sox went out and paid him the big money doesn't mean necessarily that he's 100% healthy, and there definitely are question marks there. I think over the long haul, unless he is hurt, he will find his top form.
All right, so let's get into today's action. As I mentioned, there's 10 games. And speaking of home runs, let's start in Baltimore. The Orioles taking on the White Sox. We have Manny Manuelos, who is starting today, a lefty on the hill for the White Sox. Lucas Giolito hit the IL, going up against David Hess. And just, a couple things that I always look at, Neil, when looking at pitchers. I look at fly ball rates, I look at, contact rates and hard hit rates. And for Hess, I mean, all the boxes check off in a negative way for him. I mean, he's got a 43% hard hit rate. He's got a 58% fly ball rate and an 85% contact rate. Those are all top 10 marks in baseball. And the Orioles have allowed a league high 57 home runs this season, 27 from their bullpen alone. Unbelievable. And Hess, he's given up 7 home runs. So, I mean, he is a big part of it. He's a big part of the reason why Baltimore is giving up a lot of these home runs. Joe and I had said heading into the weekend that this was a good spot for guys like Nelson Cruz, Jonathan Scope to get back, just to get going with, trips to Camden. They had obviously hit a few home runs in their day as a member of the Orioles, and that's what happened. I mean, Minnesota had they had 11 home runs on Saturday alone, Neil. I know there was a doubleheader, but 11 home runs alone. So do you like any White Sox today against Hess?
Well, I always like Eloy Jimenez. I think he's just figuring out the off-speed pitches, and he's obviously got huge potential at a reasonable price. But just the middle of that order, if you wanted to go for a stack, is pretty solid. Moncada, Abreu, Alonso, Jimenez, Tim Anderson, even all the way down to Wellington Castillo. On the flip side, I definitely have a soft spot for Jonathan Villar, and he hasn't been a top-notch hitter against left-handed pitchers in the last couple years, but there's definitely potential there. Belianos, you mentioned, not great. I mean, he doesn't have a large sample of major league numbers, but allowed a 368 on base percentage, 352 WOBA to right-handed hitters. And Villar, back in 2016, showed that the skill set is there to really tee off on. Southpaws, 385 OPS. 385 on base percentage, 236 ISO and 393 WOBA against lefties in 2016 for Villar. So the potential is there, and he's probably going to hit in the top third of the lineup. And, this could be a high scoring game potentially.
Yeah, I think it should be. It's right now it opened up at 10. It's at 9.5. I would take the over on that game. I think there's going to be some runs scored. As I mentioned, Hess has just struggled to keep the ball in the park. So I think White Sox actually will. I think they're a strong stack. Right now, their team implied total is at 5. It's one of the highest on the board. Of course, Coors is always going to, whenever there's a game at Coors, you're always going to have that as the highest total game on the board. And team implied totals there for Washington, Colorado high. But I think you can get by with definitely some White Sox. Banuelos, I can't imagine him going deep into the game. He does have some strikeout potential, but he's not somebody that I would roll out on DraftKings. Let's move over to Pittsburgh. It's the complete opposite. The Orioles are giving up home runs left, right, and center, and Pittsburgh not giving up anything. In fact, they're 2.54 ERA. Their team ERA is the best in baseball, and even better in terms of starters. 2.11. It's the best mark in the NL. The Rays actually up at the top, 1.92. Just phenomenal stuff with Tampa Bay and their pitching staff. But Pittsburgh doesn't give up anything, and PNC Park is a nice pitcher-friendly park, but they don't have much offense, Neil, and that's my problem. It's really hard to really feel great about any of their bats, even with Zack Godley, who's a fly ball pitcher on the hill today.
Yeah, and I think this is a get-right spot for Zack Godley. The 1.57 home run per 9 has hurt him this season. That's way above his career marks. But Pittsburgh enters with a 152 ISO and 301 WOBA against righties. So this is a potential get-right spot for Godley, and I think he's got a reasonable price, and especially as their number 2 pitcher on DraftKings or Yahoo or something. I mean, puts him right in the sweet spot. And it's also important to remember that Godley hasn't had an easy schedule to start. Road starts against the Dodgers and Braves, home dates against Boston and San Diego. And the Padres are an underrated offense at times. I mean, they've got a lot of bats in that lineup all of a sudden. So, if you give Godley a little bit of a pass and think that he can bounce back, I would say the Pittsburgh Pirates are the perfect opponent for him to do that against.
Yeah, so they rank near the bottom in every single offensive category. And, part of the reason they've been so good actually is Joe Musgrove has been, a lot of people in the fantasy community waiting for his breakout season. This will be his fourth start of the year. So far in 22 innings, he has 21 strikeouts. He's only allowed 2 earned runs and 13 hits. The 2 runs came in his last start against Detroit. So if you had the choice, you'd lean Godley over Musgrove. You think maybe a little bit more upside with Zack?
Well, I think there's more of contrarian value there for sure.
Good call. Yeah, I think you're right there. 3.6 team implied total for Arizona is one of the lowest on the board, and 4 for Pittsburgh. So I think this will be a low-scoring game. If you want to take the under, you want to take a shot on Godley, I don't mind Musgrove as well. Let's move over to Tampa Bay. We have Yanni Chirinos. He's making the start for the Rays. He's only had a couple starts this year. I don't expect him to go deep, really, in this ball game today, but he's been decent, and the whole Rays, they're a weird team to figure out, really, in just terms of stacking their studs, unless it's Snell or Charlie Morton. But for Chirinos, again, this is his third start. He came out of the pen in his last outing. He had 5 innings, only allowed the 1 hit and 5 strikeouts. I'm just not sure how deep he'll go. Kansas City, Brad Keller, on the other hand, 3.6 team applied total for the Royals. Do you have a feel with this game here tonight?
I would just say that Chirinos pitches well at home. 3.26 FIP and 25 strikeout percentage, right on the dot. Strikes out 1 and 4. So he's already had the dominant start against the Houston Astros on his resume this season. So I would say the upside is there. I agree there's some risk, but I think that's kind of the whole nature of daily fantasy sports is risk reward, right? So maybe there is a little bit of concern surrounding him for the exact same reasons you just laid out, Chris. And then maybe his ownership comes in a little lower than it should, and there's profit potential there. So I definitely think he's a solid pitcher. You just don't know how deep he's going to go into the game. I'm not scared of the Kansas City Royals, though.
No, I'm not scared of them either. Hunter Dozier is very interesting. He's got some power in his bat. If there is one thing with Chirinos, he has a 50% fly ball rate so far this season. So maybe if you're looking for some standalone value, I do like him in the 4 spot. He's got a very high hard hit rate, 43%, 40 last year. I don't believe in the 300 average, but he does have some power in a small sample size. Last year, he went deep 11 times. So he's got some power in his bat. And on the other side, Keller comes in with a 79% contact rate. We've been all over the Rays for a few days now. We mentioned, they ran into Boston, but before that, they were just really taking advantage of some fly ball pitchers, and the Orioles came to town, and there was home runs left, right, and center. So, our boy Austin Meadows is on the IL, though, so we can't play him today. Let's move on to Philadelphia, New York. There's definitely actually going to be some runs scored in this game. We have Jake Arrieta against Steven Matz. Team implied total for the Phillies, 4.2. For New York, it's 4.4. Jake Arrieta enters with an 84% contact rate. It's the 3rd highest in the game. And for Matz, it's an 80.4% contact rate. Both guys been hit hard, Neil, to start the season.
Yeah, I think Matt's stat line's a little out of whack because of his last start. He kind of had some poor luck. I think Evan Rosario booted a couple balls, and
yeah, you got the error, and that was a rough first inning for him, right? He didn't have. I don't think he had one out.
No, and 8 runs against or something. It was really bad. So, sometimes the small sample really can throw things off. I think Matz is a good pitcher, but bottom line is these two teams are hitting really well, and I would stay clear of the both pitchers, and I would look to the middle of the lineups if needed, and you have the salary room to manipulate and fire a couple of them in. Robinson Cano's kind of been sneaky good, and then obviously Bryce Hoskins, Andrew McCutchen are proven mashers. So definitely against lefties.
Definitely against lefties. I was going to say McCutchen is he's phenomenal against lefties. So there's been some injuries now in this Phillies lineup over the past couple of days. Gene Segura hit the IL, Kingery hit the IL. So looks like Cesar Hernandez could jump up into that 2 spot. Obviously gets a little bit of a boost there. I'm not crazy about him. I would like to see Franco move up the lineup. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. And you mentioned Cano. Keep an eye on him. I know he was spotted with a soft cast on his hand yesterday after the outing, but Joe and I, Neil, we always bring him up because he's in a great spot in the order. Mets are an underrated stack. I feel like they just go low owned most times. And their offense is decent. And for whatever reason, Cano just kind of checks in as one of the better values like every single time the Mets play. I mean, 3-3 on DK. It just seems like another steal, Neil.
Yeah, I've actually, he's one of my highest owned players in season long. Just a professional hitter, new environment, kind of flew under the radar, had this suspension last year, but he's a Hall of Fame hitter. So yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. I mean, he's one of my most highly owned season long guys, and he hasn't been great so far, but he's been solid. A lot of doubles, and all it takes is a couple of those doubles to clear the fence, and he's the next Tommy LaStella.
No, Tommy LaStella, a couple shout outs. This guy going yard. Maybe we'll have to play him tonight. Jeff McNeil is interesting to me as well. I know Joe is a huge fan of his. He touched on him on fantraxhq.com. I recently had an article just came out today as well. Just everything that you missed from last week, week 4, covered all 30 teams. So if you want to check that out, maybe there's a couple, tidbits that can help you out in a DFS standpoint season long as well. But, back to the article Joe wrote is just for McNeil, just a high contact guy, really just underrated bat in that lineup, and has been producing now for, go back to last season in the second half, really just strong producer and just making good contact, and going up against a guy like Jake Arrieta. I think when you have a contact pitcher, it's always a good option to get a couple contact bats in there for sure. So I think he fits the bill. Let's head over to Boston. Now, there is a chance of some rain here, looking like an 83% chance of precipitation. So this is really the best pitching matchup on the board. It's crazy to think, but Matt Boyd has been really good this season. He's getting a lot of swing and misses. He's 9,100. He's 9,000. Yeah, he's over $9,000. It's unbelievable. I have to double check that, Neil. I mean, he's $9,100 on DK. He's more than Chris Sale right now. We mentioned Sale and the struggles he's had to start the season. So we got the lefty here on the hill. Detroit 3.3 team implied total, and then we have the Red Sox at 4.8. Going to Chris Sale today, I mean, for the LineStar app, he projects as the highest guy on both sites, and just as one of the better value guys. You mentioned the velocity was back up. What's your thoughts on Sale going up against Detroit? I mean, this is a really good spot for him to get right. Yeah,
absolutely. I don't really have a whole lot of confidence in the Detroit Tigers. Obviously, Nick Castellanos is a strong hitter, but other than that, I think Chris Sale can absolutely dominate this lineup. But is he going to pitch deep into the game if he gets on a roll? I still think there's some overarching concerns here with Chris Sale, but he definitely needs to be considered long and hard. My big play from this game is Xander Bogaerts, just because of his success against lefties, and I could see the bottom falling out for Matt Boyd. One thing to note too here is the wind is blowing in. I don't know necessarily how much of an impact that would have at Fenway, but it's probably not going to be a very nice day. So that could favor, the pitchers to kind of keep hitters off balance. But I definitely like Bogaerts. 412 on base percentage and 354 WOBA against lefties dating back to last year. So just rock solid right in the middle of the lineup.
Yeah, and I mean, all it takes is a couple wins. I mentioned that every time I see the Red Sox, underdogs on the road, I jump on them. And it worked out this weekend. They were road dogs all 3 games, and, they came out on top. And obviously they're huge favorites here so far. Talking to you guys, they're minus 197. So huge favorites. Good point by you with the wind and the weather. This may be a game to stay clear of, but for Boyd, I agree. I think the bottom could fall out a little bit. Now, I mentioned he's getting some swing and misses. Good stuff. He's faced some weaker opponents, so this will be a true test for him against the Red Sox. He's a fly ball pitcher, so the home runs are going to happen. He's going to allow some, and he's not going to be able to get away from that. So he's going to strike some guys out, but he's going to allow some home runs. Steve Pearce is going to get in the lineup every time they face a lefty. I find he's a pretty good value. He's checking in on the LineStar app as well. Over on DraftKings, Neil, he's $3,600. And on the FanDuel side, he's 2-2. So, I mean, if you're playing on FanDuel, and it is definitely going to be a risk. You mentioned DFS. That's what it's all about, risk. Maybe you don't want to play Pearce in cash, but maybe you want to get him in there if you're somebody who likes to play multiple lineups in tournaments, because Steve Pearce, especially over on the FanDuel side, put him in there in the 3 spot in this lineup, and just, watch the points pile up. Let's move over to St. Louis. This is the 3rd time already Jack Flaherty has had to face Milwaukee. Finally, he's going to get them at home. But, I was just looking into some numbers with Flaherty. I like him, man. I think he's a solid pitcher. But right now, he's got a 55% hard hit rate. It's the third highest among starting pitchers with at least 10 innings. So, I mean, I want to give him a bit of a pass, Neil, but it's so hard to roster this guy against Milwaukee. I mean, his first start of the season, he only went 4 innings, gave up seven hits, 4 earned runs, a home run, only struck out 4. Then he faced the Padres. You mentioned them. He had a pretty good start against them, though. He faced the Dodgers, a really good start against the Dodgers. Then he faces Milwaukee again in Milwaukee, gives up 5 runs, another 2 bombs, 9 hits. He didn't even get out of the third inning. So he's the highest paid. You looking on DraftKings, 98. You look over on FanDuel, a little bit of a discount there with Flaherty, 78. Do you have a feel on him? Would you roster him? To me, he's just a contrarian play against these Brewers bats.
Yeah, sums it up. It wouldn't be someone I was targeting. Unfortunately, I don't have shares. I'm with you. I think he's a good young pitcher. I think he's got the stuff to be a long-standing rotation member for the Cards and do really well. This is a horrible matchup, though. The Brewers are deep lineup. This is a division rivalry. They've been scoring runs against each other all year long. I just don't like going up against the murderer's row of Yelich, Moustakas. I really think Travis Shaw is an excellent buy low candidate right now in value. He's struggling against right-handed pitchers this season, but in the past, we know that he's had almost identical seasons against righties in 2017, 2018, and there's definitely statistical correction ahead of his 278 slugging percentage and 253 WOBA against righties, because he's actually hit the ball really hard, 49 or 46.9 hard hit percentage this season. So Shaw is a buy low candidate for me, and a nice little plug in there in the second tier of the middle of that Milwaukee lineup.
Oh yeah, Yelich is unbelievable. What do you make of him? What do you make of Christian Yelich? I mean, he almost had another bomb yesterday. Cody Bellinger jumped the fence and caught it, and then Bellinger went yard. It was so fun to watch those two go head-to-head over the weekend. Bellinger's got, I think he's got near 28 RBIs and 11 bombs himself, and Yelich with 13. I mean, these two are just – there's nothing to say, but, Neil, I thought maybe a little bit of, regression in terms of, home runs for Yelich, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
No, in fact, if he's got – till the end of the month to hit 2 more bombs, and then he's the first player in Major League history to have 15 in the first month of the season.
I think it's a good bet he's going to do it. He's still got another 8 days or so left in this month.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of, it's made the fantasy landscape very unique this season. And we touched on it off the top, so don't need to really rehash, but with all the starting pitching injuries, the horrible mid-tier starting options, and then all these players hitting so many home runs and posting huge numbers. If you don't have Bellinger, if you don't have Yelich, especially in a rotisserie setting, you are way behind the 8 ball. So it's been interesting. I mean, obviously we've got months of season for things to even out, but it's been an interesting first couple weeks.
Yeah, it really has. So I'm with you on Travis Shaw. I think that's a pretty good call. I've been saying like him and Jesus Aguilar, but Aguilar is really just he's struggling, but he is a discount as well. 2-4. They're both 2-4 on the FanDuel side, Neil, and they're both 3,000 on the DraftKings side. I think from a tournament standpoint, 1 or 2 of these guys are eventually going to break out. It's probably better to play them at home, in Milwaukee, this game on the road, but even still, I think if you're into playing a lot of tournament lineups, they both stand out. Mike Moustakas stands out. Ryan Braun has struggled to start the season, stands out. You mentioned Murderer's Row. It's a high-powered offense, so eventually those guys are going to turn around. On the other side, I really like the St. Louis bats today. I think you can play them in cash. Adrian Hauser, I really had to dig deep into Hauser. To be honest, man, I didn't know like a whole lot about him, but I mean, this is his first major league start. I mean, he came out of the pen last year and really struggled. 13.2 innings last season. He gave up 5 earned runs, 7 walks. He only struck out 8, and so far. It's just a really small sample size AAA ball. He's had 3 starts, and they've actually been pretty good starts for him. A 1.10 ERA, 9.92 K per 9, not walking any guys, but the larger sample, if you go look at 2018 in the minors, really struggled with the walks, didn't strike out a whole lot of guys when he jumped up from AA to AAA. The strikeouts really came down. He was giving up a lot of contact, a lot of hard contact, and really just struggling with the home runs. So I think it's a good opportunity. You want to jump on some of these Cardinals bats. You can trust them in cash. And Jose Martinez is a guy that, he's starting to get some more play, Neil. He's getting in the lineup. He had a pretty good weekend. He's got some power in his bat. He's in a good spot in that lineup as well, hitting in the 5 spot, 4-2 on DraftKings, and just a steal, an absolute steal on the FanDuel side. He's $2,800. Let's move over to Houston. We have the Astros, a 5.5 team implied total. They got Brad Peacock on the hill. He's just making his 3rd start. Of course, he was put to the pen because Houston had a couple, just the way their schedule worked out. They had some off days. So Peacock will be making his 3rd start. Not sure how deep he's going to be able to go into this start, but it's a good matchup against Jake Odorizzi on the other side, a fly ball pitcher, somebody, Neil, that we pick on a lot. And that's why we get the Astros at 5.5, the team implied total. Joe and I like to call home run shots at the end of the show, or, through the show when we find something. George Springer had 3 home runs last week. Alex Bregman, 3 home runs. We've been talking about Bregman, Neil, for a while, because on the FanDuel side, he's been super, super cheap. He still checks in under $4K, $3,900. Michael Brantley, 38. Carlos Correa, 37. I think that there's going to be some home runs in this game against Jake Odorizzi. I think my home run call may have to come from this game, Neil.
Well, I'd add Tyler White to the mix there too, just because affordable, and he's
G's on FanDuel.
Yeah, exactly. So I definitely add Tyler White to the mix. This is going to be another big high scoring game, really. I'd like to see Peacock do well. He was a guy that I put a lot of stock in season long, and so obviously moving to the bullpen was a little frustrating, but knowing that he was going to come back to the rotation, pitch for a good team in a nice pitcher's park, Minute Maid there. So I don't have a whole lot of faith in either Peacock or Odorizzi. I really like Odorizzi long-term too. I think the Twins are a good team, especially defensively. And this is just a really tough matchup for Odorizzi, but I think he'll, show some signs over the next month and a half of settling into that solid mid-rotation, back rotation fantasy starter. So I don't have a whole lot of love in this game. Obviously, Eddie Rosario's pretty hot.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you go to Baltimore.
Yeah.
All those guys, really,
Yeah.
Cruz hit a couple bombs, Crone went yards, Scope hit a couple. Rosario had 3 on Saturday alone.
Yeah.
So that'll happen.
Max Kepler looks like a decent, if he is going to lead off, and not too expensive, and there's some potential there. He's obviously a little dinged up, so that's definitely something to keep an eye on. But I agree with you. I can't really disagree with anything you said about the Astros and where they're at. They're probably just getting going into mid-season form, right?
Absolutely, yeah. They're just starting a big weekend series in Texas where a lot of runs were scored, and Texas pitching staff is a lot like Baltimore's. There's just a good opportunity to jump on some bats when they play them. So I'll go with the home run call here today. I'll say Alex Bregman continues to get hot. Again, if you're playing over on FanDuel, it's just a really affordable stack. The 3, 4, 5 hitters. You mentioned Tyler White. I think it's a good GPP option as well for him to get going. Let's move over to Colorado. Here's the game right now with the team implied totals are through the roof here at Coors. Right now it's an over/under at 11. It's the highest on the board, and like any other game at Coors, it's going to be tough to get these bats in your lineup. So Tyler Anderson, the lefty, going up against Jeremy Hellickson. Hellickson has actually surprisingly been pretty good for a long time now, Neil. He's allowed 3 or fewer runs in 20 of his last 21 starts, or 2 or fewer in 16 of those outings, but he does have a league-high 88.4 contact percentage in his 2 starts, which is not what you want if you're heading to Coors Field. So we have the Rockies 5.8 team implied total, and we have the Nationals 5.3 team implied total. Ryan McMahon returned to the lineup this week. In his return, he had 2 home runs. The LineStar app really loves him. They think he's a pretty good value in the 5 spot on both sites. He's 3-4 on FanDuel. Again, I find the pricing tight on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, you can find some of these values. What are you doing about this game? You're not going to go to Jeremy Hellickson, are you?
Well, when there's an acre between each outfielder, that contact rate you mentioned is going to be a little bit of an issue. So no, I guess you summed it up pretty well. I think everyone knows the ins and the outs of how to, get some Coors Field bats in your lineups when when it's affordable and when you can make it work. Obviously, Ryan Zimmerman is a little bit of a value. His history against left-handed pitchers, the last, dating back to the beginning of last season's off the charts. 469 on base, 462 WOBA. I mean, that's just elite production. And then I also sort of like Tony Wolters as an affordable catcher. 407 on base percentage at Coors Field this season. So he's pretty cheap, 3.6 on DK, and Zimmerman's only 4.3 on DK. So there's definitely some potential there. But if you want to spend up elsewhere, obviously there's good case for doing so.
Yeah, I mean, with some of the pitchers, like we don't love Flaherty, we don't love Arrieta, so I mean, it's not like you have to spend up at the pitcher. So you can get some bats in here from this game if you want to. I love the Zimmerman call. We were on it last week against the lefty. It didn't work out. I think people should continue to ride that. He's in a great spot in the order. Again, FanDuel, he's a steal. And if Anthony Rendon doesn't get in this lineup, he didn't play on Sunday. I noticed Howie Kendrick moved up. Robles moved up. He hit leadoff when Eaton didn't play last week. He moved into the 2 spot when Rendon wasn't in the lineup. So if Robles moves up to the 2 spot, I know he's expensive, but that's going to boost his value. And Howie Kendrick, if he finds a way to get into this lineup, maybe a cheap bat to consider. Let's move over. 2 more games left to talk about here before we wrap things up. The Yankees and the Angels. I'm just amazed with the Yankees. I just really am, Neil. It's not like I feel bad for the Yankees because I don't. Like, whatever. It is what it is. But it's unbelievable to me. I saw a graphic the other day. Their entire roster. I mean, you start at catcher with Sanchez, you move over, Bird at first. It's really the whole outfield, and Hicks and Stanton and Judge just recently landed on the IL. Obviously, Didi Gregorius has already been out. Andujar's been out for a bit. Tulowitzki, some of their bench guys that they were, expecting bigger roles have been out of the line. I look at this lineup and I'm just like, oh my goodness. But this is a good opportunity against Matt Harvey, who just really hasn't been good this season, giving up a lot of contact, a lot of hard contact. I don't know where you go with some of these Yankee bats. I mean, are you feeling any of them? I mean, LeMahieu's got a decent average, but he doesn't have a lot of power.
No, Gleyber Torres and Clint Frazier aren't expensive though, and they should bat 4th, 5th, or right in the middle of the lineup. So they're pluggable in there against Harvey. I kind of look at this as a potential get right spot for J Happ too. I mean,
yeah, good call.
The Angels, the Angels aren't doing much against lefties for quite some time, dating back to last year. So you pitch around Mike Trout and you should be fine. But they've only got a 20.5 strikeout percentage against southpaws, and they also only have a 16.5 mark this year. So there might not be a whole lot of upside there with Happ, but he should be able to manage that lineup and keep them in check and potentially go deep in a game. So I'm not really bullish about anything else here, except for I would say that Gleyber Torres and Clint Frazier are definitely in play just because they're hitting the middle of the lineup, because they're talented hitters, and Matt Harvey isn't scaring anyone. But J Happ there is definitely a decent option because of his matchup against the Angels.
Yeah, I think Happ actually is one of my favorite on the board. You said it perfectly, Neil. They're not a team that strikes out, but they're not a team that has had success against lefties. Yeah, dating back to last season, the dead last average against lefties. So far this year, they're near the bottom in terms of WOBA and average against lefties as well. So I think, this is a really good spot. Good call by you for J Happ to get right. I like him. He's expensive. You're going to have to spend up, but I think it's worth it. 9.3 on DK, 8,000 on FanDuel. And I like the Yankees on the money line too. I know it could be a little risky looking at this lineup, but they're in a good spot to have some success against Matt Harvey. And great calls. Torres, Clint Frazier. Frazier had a big weekend. I was a little on the fence with him from a season-long standpoint. I wasn't sure because I just didn't know where the playing time was going to come from. I thought Hicks and Stan back in the lineup soon, but now with Judge out, it looks like he's going to have some regular at-bats for a while now. So let's move over to the final game of the night. We have Oakland 4.7 team implied total. Chris Bassett on the hill against Mike Minor, the lefty, 3.9 team implied total. And as I mentioned, I mean, I just never would imagine this time of the season that Mike Minor would be more expensive than Chris Sale, but it is what it is. I'm not a huge Mike Minor fan. He gives up a lot of contact. The fly ball rate is a little bit concerning, but this is a decent park for him. What's your takeaways on this game? Any thoughts? I mean, Danny Santana has been interesting in the 2 spot for Texas, but he's actually pretty expensive.
Yeah, he is on DK, that's for sure.
Yeah.
When I look at Mike Minor, I mean, he's been a solid pitcher when healthy throughout his career. He's out pitched his peripherals in most situations. His ERA is normally lower than his FIP, which I think there's a skill there, obviously. But because of his price, he would be more of an against the grain option for me. Contrarian play, but spacious Oakland Coliseum helps, and he can add up a few strikeouts there against the free swinging Rangers, who are good, but they don't have a real scary lineup. And he against Oakland. I mean, there's some potential there. So again,
you can get by
him being a against the grain option for sure.
Okay, so to wrap it up, something that Joe and I just quickly run through. So we like some runs in the Baltimore game with David Hess on the hill. I think it's another good opportunity to attack the Orioles. I think there'll be some runs scored there, so you want to get some White Sox in there. Yohan Moncada is a decent home run call as well. I'm going to go with my boy Alex Bregman in that one. We think that there's going to be low scoring affair in the Pittsburgh and Arizona game, so maybe Zack Godley on the other side. Joe Musgrove is someone to definitely think about. Definitely, we like some runs in the Mets and the Phillies game with Arrieta and Matz on the hill. And keep in mind, LineStar's been very good with some of their values and some of their calls. Steven Matz, they really like Matz in this matchup. Neil mentioned that there's been some unluck, just a little bit of unluckiness with Matz so far to start the season, some errors. Chris Sale is somebody I think you guys should maybe take a flyer on tonight for sure. There's a price discount, and he's got a really good matchup today to get right. We like the St. Louis Cardinals, love the Astros against Jake Odorizzi, and we like Jay Happ in there as well. Neil, is there anything else that you want to get to before we get out of here? Maybe is there a home run call put you on the spot? Is there a guy that you think could go yard tonight?
I would say from a value perspective, a guy to chase, and I touched on him, is definitely Travis Shaw. I think there's potential for him to definitely leave the yard. And then a little bit from Oakland, I like the combo of Chris Davis and Chad Pinder against Mike Minor. I talked about Mike Minor being, a decent play, but, those two have been pretty successful against southpaws. And Chris Davis himself, 303 ISO, dating back to last year against lefties. That's a high-end mark. So maybe he's the one that leaves the yard. So I like Chris Davis as a home run call from a more expensive player, and Travis Shaw from a value standpoint.
Love it. Chris Davis, $3,900 on FanDuel. Pinder, $2,500 on FanDuel. 2 good steals. Neil, always
Chris
a pleasure,
with a K. Chris with a K.
That's
man.
right. Chris with a K. We were playing Chris with a C when he was $500 on FanDuel. We were like, why not? Let's just get him out there, and maybe he'll be all right. It allowed you to do whatever you wanted. But yeah, Chris with a K. Nice. Now you watch Chris with a C. We'll go yard as well. Neil, always a pleasure. NA Parker 77s, where you can give him a follow on Twitter. Neil, appreciate your time. I encourage everybody to check out. Obviously, you're listening to the show, but subscribe, give us a rate and review. We really appreciate that. Download the app, some fantastic stuff over there at LineStar. So everybody, good luck if you're playing DFS. Let the winners be yours, and we will catch you tomorrow.
You've been listening to the DFS On Deck podcast, brought to you by LineStar. Hit subscribe, tell a friend, and stay tuned for the next episode from fantasy baseball experts Joe Pisapia and Chris Meaney.